words according to what you hear from the conversation. First, you have some time to read the questions. Now, listen to the phone call.
Hi, Mum. How are things?
Oh, hello, Jane. Are you all right?
Yeah, great. I just thought I'd phone to let you know we're okay. It's all really wonderful. The weather's fantastic. I'm sitting here in short sleeves and I'm still hot. I can't believe it's December. Did you get my card?
No, the postman hasn't been here for a couple of days. But you know what the post's like at this time of the year. They've probably got a backlog to catch up on. How was your flight in the end, by the way?
Oh, awful. It was a typical charter. We were delayed and had to sit around for hours, so we didn't take off until after midnight, and it was 5 in the morning before we got to the hotel.
Oh dear, what a pity.
But we're making up for it now. On Monday we had a great day in the beach, just lying in the sun and swimming. The water's lovely. You know, not at all cold. That was to recover from Sunday when we hired a car from one of those rent-a-car agencies and drove all around the island, up into the mountains. It was really spectacular. I mean, the scenery is wonderful.
Oh, that's good. I can see you're going to have a good fortnight.
Yeah, it's all going by too fast. A fortnight is too short. I wish now we'd booked for 3 weeks instead. Still, can't be helped. Listen, do you think you could come and meet us when we get back? The plane gets in at about 6:15 on the 8th. Let's see, I have the tickets here. Yes, it says arrive 6:15 on January the 8th.
Yes, of course, dear, don't worry, we'll be there. Now, just make sure you put lots of cream on if you're lying in the sun in all that heat.
Well, actually, I fell asleep on the beach the other day and had a really red nose, all peeling and burnt.
Well, be careful. And what's John up to?
Oh, he's having a lie down. He isn't feeling very well today. I think it's something he ate. We had a big meal out last night, so perhaps the food was too heavy. You know, they eat really late here. We still have another hour before dinner.
Good heavens! We had our supper hours ago. Words. First, you have some time to read the questions. Now, listen to the talk. Do UFOs really exist? This question divides people into two sharply opposing camps, the believers and the non-believers. The former is quite convinced that extraterrestrials exist and travel around the universe in flying saucers. The non-believers are sure that the only form of life exists here on Earth and that any UFO sightings can be scientifically explained as purely terrestrial phenomena. So let's take the believers first and see what evidence they have to support their belief. For many years, there have been reports of strange flying objects, and in 1947, the name of unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, was given to these phenomena. Many of the reports of UFOs have a curious similarity. The objects are generally described as disc or cigar-shaped. In daylight, they appear silvery, often luminous or surrounded by an aura. At night, they have the appearance of bright lights, often yellow-red in colour. They are said to travel at high speed and accelerate rapidly, frequently disappearing suddenly. A sound, described as a low hum or swish, has been heard when the UFOs appear, and they sometimes stop and hover or rotate over certain spots, as though observing something. These reports have come from all types of people: policemen, farmers, walkers, aircraft pilots, children, housewives. In fact, no one class can be selected as being particularly susceptible to sightings. Perhaps, though, the most convincing evidence has come from the aircraft pilots whose visual sightings have been supported by radar tracking. Most radar operators have compared the UFOs on their radar screens to large aircraft, though they have an unexpected manner of simply vanishing, unlike a normal aircraft. Certain photographic evidence of UFOs has also been produced, although many of the prints are unclear or blurred. But the most astonishing reports have been of close encounters with UFOs. Dr. Hynek, director of the Center for UFO Studies in Illinois, USA, has classified these encounters as of 3 kinds. A close encounter of the first kind is when a witness reports seeing a UFO within a few hundred meters, often when it has landed on the ground. A close encounter of the second kind is when the UFO has left a physical trace, such as an indentation or scorching of the ground, a burnt area of vegetation, or broken telephone wires or tree branches. A close encounter of the third kind is when people report actual contact with alien beings. Here, the descriptions vary widely from reports of normal-looking humans, generally wearing unusual clothes or speaking a strange language, to those little green men with 4 legs. This third kind of encounter is the most difficult to believe in, although many of the witnesses appear to be sensible men and women not given to lying. From all the different kinds of report, there seems to emerge a general pattern of UFOs. There is a high level of agreement on the shape, color, movement, and sound of UFOs, but far less coherence when describing extraterrestrial beings. To the non-believers, they don't exist. In fact, the non-believers state quite categorically that all UFOs have a scientific explanation. They are either natural phenomena, such as ball lightning, marsh gas, comets, or northern lights, or they are aircraft seen from an unusual angle. Non-believers also suggest UFOs might be planes or rockets which are on government secret lists and therefore of designs unknown to the public. They discount the evidence of radar sightings as the screens sometimes show up radar shadows or mirages of things which do not exist. Photographs are dismissed as fakes or as pictures of aircraft taken from unusual angles. Finally, the 3 types of close encounters are discounted by the non-believers as hoaxes, hallucinations, or people misinterpreting information. The first kind of encounter can be accounted for in the same way as a flying saucer seen in the air, as a natural phenomenon. The second kind of encounter usually has a natural cause, the heat marks resulting from fires caused by lightning or people's carelessness, the telephone wires and branches being blown down by high winds, and the indentations resulting from subsidence of the land. The third kind of encounter is generally disbelieved because no photographic or taped evidence exists. It is also felt that the witnesses may have been suffering from abnormal mental or physical states at the time. So, to sum up, it is very difficult to say whether UFOs definitely exist or not. The evidence for their existence is rather weak, but on the other hand, there are certain strange phenomena which cannot be explained scientifically at the moment. Perhaps we can leave the subject with a quote from Dr. Hynek. Maybe The whole phenomenon is not as mysterious as we think. After all, 100 years ago, we knew nothing about nuclear energy. Maybe our scientific knowledge is just not advanced enough to explain UFOs. In the meantime, reports will continue to pour into the Centre for UFO Studies, and spotters all over the world will continue to watch the skies for signs of man from outer space.
Section 2. In this section, you'll hear an introduction about ancient architectures. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 20. Now listen carefully to the tape and answer questions 11 to 20.
The architecture of the ancients often reflects the ideas and beliefs of that time. Some of the ancient structures can give us a glimpse into the minds of the people who built them. Now, Professor Francis is going to talk to us about ancient architecture.
No story is more interesting or impressive than the story of architecture, and in particular the activities of human beings in the art of building. Let's have a look at this in some detail. Did you ever visit the pyramids? Look at this picture, please. The pyramids in Egypt are true wonders of the ancient world. Khufu's pyramid is a stunning 138-metre-high mass of 2.3 million stones, each weighing about 2.5 tons. It was built to geometrical perfection over 4,500 years ago, with simple stone and copper tools. It was so far advanced that some have suggested it was designed by aliens. Actually, there is an astronomical significance to the perfect precision of the pyramids. By using two stars that circle the sky polar point, Egyptian astronomers were able to arrange the pyramids due north. This was done because they believed the king's afterlife and the stars were closely related. They believed their pharaoh, that is, their king, had been transformed into another living being, a light in the sky in contrast to the darkness of death. Okay, now let's look at another picture. On this picture is Athens' ancient Parthenon. It is an immense columned temple, built almost entirely of marble. Athens' ancient Parthenon is a perfect model of classic Greek architecture. It was built to honour Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Therefore, it includes the ideals of logic and reason in its design. Built in the 5th century BC, the Parthenon is made up of almost 140 columns. The Greeks associated the columns with the virtues of a human being: strong, orderly, proud, and beautiful. The height and width of the Parthenon are designed with the rational logic of geometry. The upper diameter of each column is a bit narrower than its base. It bulges slightly in the middle and slants inward. This kind of optical illusion makes the columns appear more graceful and thus more beautiful. The Parthenon also symbolizes democracy. Each column supports the entire structure, just as each person contributes to the government. It symbolizes that Athens' government is democratic. Finally, I am going to introduce the Roman Colosseum, a large oval structure for public sports events, entertainment, or assemblies. The Roman Colosseum displays the practical nature and political thinking of Romans. The Colosseum was built in 80 AD, when, throughout its vast empire, Romans' population and wealth were growing. It was necessary for politicians to entertain the people in return for their support. Gladiators would battle wild animals, and even one another in order to entertain the bloodthirsty crowds. Constructed with tons of marble, the Colosseum stood 48 metres high. It has the capacity to hold up to 50,000 spectators. Spectators sat on the lower 3 levels, surrounded by towering roofed passageways. On hot days, a cover suspended from the top story provided shade from the sun. Ancient architecture gives us a sense of the different societies that build these amazing monuments. Through it, we can imagine what life was like when those civilizations were flourishing. That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 3 on page 55. Test 2, section 3. In this section, you will hear a discussion about a system of writing for the blind known as Braille. First, look at questions 21 to 23. Now listen to the first part of the discussion and complete the notes for questions 21 to 23.
We're very pleased to welcome to our special interest group today Dr. Linda Graycar, who is from the City Institute for the Blind. Linda is going to talk to us about the system of writing for the blind known as Braille. Linda, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, we'd like to keep this session pretty informal, and I know Linda won't mind if members of the group want to ask questions as we go along. Well, let's start with an obvious one. What is Braille, and where does it get its name from?
Well, as you said, Braille is a system of writing used by and for people who cannot see. It gets its name from the man who invented it, the Frenchman Louis Braille, who lived in the early 19th century.
Was Louis Braille actually blind himself?
Well, he wasn't born blind, but he lost his sight at the age of 3 as the result of an accident in his father's workshop. Louis Braille then went to Paris, to the National Institute for Blind Children, and that's where he invented his writing system at the age of only 15 in 1824, while he was at the Institute.
But he wasn't the first person to invent a system of touch reading for the blind, was he?
No, another Frenchman had already come up with the idea of printing embossed letters that stood out from the paper, but this was very cumbersome and inefficient.
Did Louis Braille base his system on the first one?
No, not really. When he first went to Paris, he heard about a military system of writing using 12 dots. This was a system invented by an enterprising French army officer, and it was known as night writing. It wasn't meant for the blind, but rather for battle communications at night.
That must have been fun.
Look at questions 24 to 30. Listen carefully and answer questions 24 to 30.
Anyway, Braille took this system as a starting point, but instead of using the 12 dots, which night writing used, he cut the number of dots in half and developed a 6-dot system.
Can you give us a little more information about how it works?
Well, it's a system of touch reading which uses an arrangement of raised dots called a cell. Braille numbered the dot positions 1, 2, 3 downward on the left and 4, 5, 6 downward on the right. The letters of the alphabet are then formed by using different combinations of these dots.
Yes?
So, is the writing system based on the alphabet, with each word being individually spelt out?
Well, it's not quite that simple, I'm afraid. For instance, the first 10 letters of the alphabet are formed using dots 1, 2, 4 and 5. But Braille also has its own short forms for common words. For example, B for the word but and H for have. There are many other contractions like this.
So you spell out most words letter by letter, but you use short forms for common words?
Yes, though I think that makes it sound a little easier than it actually is.
And was it immediately accepted? I mean, did it catch on straight away?
Well, yes and no. It was immediately accepted and used by Braille's fellow students at the school, but the system was not officially adopted until 1854, 2 years after Braille's death. So official acceptance was slow in coming.
I suppose it works for all languages which use the Roman alphabet.
Yes, it does, with adaptations, of course.
Can it be written by hand, or do you need a machine to produce Braille?
Well, you can write it by hand onto paper with a device called a slate and stylus. But the trick is that you have to write backwards, from right to left, so that when you turn your sheet over, the dots face upwards and can be read like English from left to right.
Oh, I see.
But these days, you'd probably use a Braille writing machine, which is a lot easier.
And tell us, Linda, is Braille used in other ways, other than for reading text?
Yes, indeed. In addition to the literary Braille code, as it's known, which of course includes English and French, there are other codes. For instance, in 1965, they created a form of Braille for mathematics.
I can't imagine trying to do maths in Braille.
Yes, that does sound difficult, I agree. And there's also a version for scientific notation. Oh, and yes, I almost forgot. There is now a version for music notation as well.
Well, thanks, Linda. That was most interesting. Now, does anyone have any last questions? Yes.
Roughly how long does it take to learn to read Braille?
Listen carefully and answer questions 24 to 30.
Test 3. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about fireworks. First, you have some time to read questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this short talk on the subject of fireworks. Now, fireworks, as I'm sure many of you know, were invented in China. though there has long been disagreement as to exactly when, or even in which century. The consensus nowadays, though, is that it was in the 6th, as there is considerable evidence of war rockets being made then. We also know that fireworks were in use by the 7th century in Arabia, where they were called Chinese arrows, reflecting their military potential. It then took a long time for them to spread to Europe. In fact, it wasn't until the 1200s that fireworks made their appearance there. The basic ingredients of fireworks have changed little to this day. Their explosive capacity comes mainly from black powder, also known as gunpowder, which is produced from a mixture of charcoal, sulphur, and potassium nitrate. A modern aerial firework, the kind used nowadays in big public displays, not the small rocket type that you might remember from your childhood, is normally made in the form of a shell, often a sphere about the size of a peach. Inside the shell are a number of stars, surrounded by black powder, and running through the centre of the round shell is a charge that makes the firework explode when it reaches the desired altitude. This is known as the bursting charge. When this explodes, it ignites the outside of the stars, which begin to burn with bright showers of sparks. Since the explosion throws the stars in all directions, you get the huge sphere of sparkling light that is so familiar at firework displays. A shell of this kind is launched from a 75mm diameter mortar, which in some ways resembles the type used by the military. The mortar is a steel, or increasingly for safety reasons, shatterproof plastic pipe. This is likely to be 500mm long and sealed at one end. The other end is aimed at the sky, and at the bottom of the pipe, below the shell, is placed a cylinder containing black powder. This has a long fuse, which projects out of the tube. When this is lit, it quickly burns down to the lifting charge, which explodes to launch the shell. In so doing, it also lights the shell's fuse. The shell's fuse burns while the shell rises to its correct altitude and then ignites the bursting charge so it explodes. More complicated shells are divided into sections and burst in 2 or 3 phases. Shells like this are called multi-break shells. They may contain stars of different colours and compositions to create softer or brighter light, more or less sparks, etc. Some shells contain explosives designed to crackle in the sky, or whistles that explode outward with the stars. The sections of a multi-break shell are ignited by different fuses, and the bursting of one section ignites the next. The shells must be assembled in such a way that each section explodes in sequence to produce a distinct, separate effect. The pattern that an aerial shell paints in the sky depends on the arrangement of stars inside the shell. For example, if the stars are equally spaced in a circle, with black powder inside the circle, you will see an aerial display of smaller star explosions equally spaced in a circle. To create a specific figure in the sky, for instance a heart shape, you create an outline of the figure in stars inside the shell. Then you place explosive charges inside those stars to blow them outward into the shape of a large heart. Each charge has to be ignited at exactly the right time, or the whole thing is spoiled. Many other shapes have particular names, like the willow. This is formed by stars that fall in the shape of willow tree branches, spreading a little to the side and then downwards. The high charcoal composition of the stars makes them long burning, so they may even stay visible until they hit the ground. The ring shell is fairly basic. It is produced by stars exploding outwards to produce a symmetrical ring of coloured lights. More complex is the pattern created by the palm, which contains large comets or charges in the shape of a solid cylinder. These travel outwards, explode and then curve downwards, like the limbs of a palm tree. The serpentine, the last one for now, is different again. When this one bursts, it sends small tubes of incendiaries scattering outwards in random paths, which may culminate in exploding stars. It can be quite spectacular.
That is the end of Test 3.